Hi guys, these are our slides for our notes and vocabulary on the Civil Rights Movement. This is chapter 8 in our textbook, Northern Lights. So remember that you need to look at all the images and read all the words that are on the slides. All of you guys need to fill in the blanks on your worksheet from the definitions and words that are in red. Okay, so the first word we're going to be talking about is movement. So a movement is an organized effort to draw attention to a problem or change the way the government works. And a movement is an organized effort to draw attention to a problem. So that means that people are organized and working together to make people know that there's a problem, or they're trying to change the way the government is working and doing things. So the civil rights movement never really ended. People are always creating new movements to progress our world into a better place. Remember earlier this year we talked about Greta Thunberg, and her movement was to stop climate change. That's one of our most recent movements, is working on climate change. So remember, a movement is when people are organized and working together to either fix a problem or change the way the government is working. Our next word is activist. An activist. An activist is a person who uses direct action to support or oppose an issue. An activist is a person who uses direct action, so is like taking action, is doing things to support or oppose an issue. So they're actively working on fixing something. Either they support it or they're trying to get rid of it because they oppose it. So an activist can stand up for something or against something, or even both. Most activists try to stick to a specific movement to create change. So here we have a picture of Martin Luther King Jr. He was an activist who was trying to take action to support African Americans and helping them with their rights, and he was opposing the people treating them poorly. So Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was doing both. He was supporting and opposing. Okay? Our next word is civil rights. So remember, the rights are the things that you get to do. So civil rights are the rights, the things you get to do that belong to a person because they are a citizen of that country. Your civil rights are the rights or the things you get to do because you are a person that is a citizen of that country. So civil rights are the promises that the government gives to its people. Not all Americans are treated fairly, though, and this is what sparked the civil rights movement. So all people are supposed to have the same rights, but they're not treated fairly, and that's what caused the civil rights movement. So now we're going to look at a minority group. So in this case, we're talking about a group as a group of people. So this is a people or a people group that is considered different from the majority of people in the society. So it's the people who are different from what you might think of as the majority of the society. And these people often do not receive the same advantages that comes with being the majority. Okay? So, but a minority group is a group that is considered different from what most people are like in that society. And they often are not treated the same because of that. Some minority groups in America tend to fit into these categories. So in America, a minority person might be any person of color, someone who's poor, people who don't speak English, people who are part of the LGBTQ community, immigrants from any place in the world, but especially poor developing countries. And all the people who fit into these categories tend to be mistreated, and they struggle to find equality in some way in America. So let's look at this picture. So in this picture, you can see that most of these people, they're fit into a perfect triangle and they all look the same. So this would be our majority group. These people over here, there's less of them, and they fit the category of being a different color, right? These guys are this orangey color. So they do not fit in. Because they don't fit in, they don't receive the same benefits that comes with being in the majority group, right? They might also not speak English. They might be poor, right? They might be from the LGBTQ community, might be immigrants, right? All of those people in these groups in America tend to be minority groups and then tend to be mistreated because of that. Our next word is segregation. This is a hard word to say, so it's segregation. This is the forced separation of people, and it's usually based on race. So segregation is when you force certain people cannot be with other people because usually their race. So throughout history, some groups of people, they tried to force other groups of people to stay away from them. So usually this is based on racism and hatred, or simply being afraid of people that you don't know. So segregation is when you are forcing people to be separate based on race, usually. It can be other factors as well, but usually it's based on race, okay? And this is usually based on racism, hatred, or just being simply afraid of people you don't know who are different than you. If we look in this picture, these are pictures of some segregation examples that happened here in America. So different people had different waiting rooms in this line. And here we can see people are protesting. And it says, "We protest school segregation." So they wanted, so different people had to go to different schools based on their race. And so they were trying to stop that. Okay, so those were our vocab, and now we are going to move into our notes. Okay, so what was the civil rights movement? So after World War II, the Cold War lasted for decades. So one decade is 10 years. So this lasted for multiple decades. So multiple years. Maybe as old as some of your parents are, in 30, 40 years. America got involved in the Korean and Vietnam Wars as well, and many people were tired of fighting. Some Americans were tired of being treated unfairly even at home, and they felt like America needed a change, right? So the civil rights movement started in the 1960s when activists, remember people who are trying to change things, tried to create a change for the minority groups, right? The people who are different from the rest in America. Many Americans peacefully and passionately fought for change and succeeded, but many of their struggles still last today. So who all got involved? So some very important American heroes got involved in the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X were the most famous activists, the people who are fighting for change, for African American equality, right, to be equal, and for civil justice reform, meaning they're changing the laws to become more fair. So, we were talking about our famous activists for African American equality. Remember, they were also fighting for civil justice reforms. That means when we are changing the laws to be more fair. So Rosa Parks also fought for the rights for women and African Americans. So those are some of our famous Americans. But here's your note that you need to write down is Hubert H. Humphrey was a Minnesota politician who pushed for equal rights for all people in America by listening to the needs of minority groups and getting them on TV and newspapers. So Hubert H. Humphrey was a Minnesota politician, so he was a person who works for the government and does politics for them. So he pushed for the equal rights of all people in America, and he listened to their needs of minority groups, and he helped get them on TV and newspapers so that they could share what they needed. Okay, so this is Rosa Parks with her picture and then a quote of hers. So it said, "I had no idea that history was being made. I was just tired of giving up." Think about, what does that mean to you? It says, "I had no idea that history was being made. I was just tired of giving up." Okay, and here we have Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and this is Hubert H. Humphrey with Dr. King. Let's go to our next slide. So how did this impact Minnesota? So Hubert H. Humphrey eventually ran for president but lost to Richard Nixon, who cheated and lost his presidency because of it. AIM stands for the American Indian Movement. The A is American, I Indian, and M movement. Was started in Minnesota after the Indian Relocation Act was created to force Native American people to assimilate. Remember, assimilate was a vocab word that we had a long time ago. And assimilate means you're forcing people to act the way you want them, to act like the majority culture. So the American Indian movement was created in Minnesota after the Indian Relocation Act was created that forced Native people to assimilate to American culture. Here's your note. Dakota and Ojibwe people led protests to save their land and their culture in Minnesota. So the Ojibwe and Dakota people, they led protests and they were trying to save their land and their culture in Minnesota because the Indian Relocation Act was trying to take their land from them. Think about all the things that we learned about with the Dakota and Ojibwe people. Think about how unfairly they were also treated. So although segregation as a law ended in America, we can still see it in our communities today, right? Can you think of any times that even though it's illegal to segregate, can you think of any times where people were treated differently because they were a minority group, because of their race, because they were part of the LGBTQ community, or because they were poor, right? Or because they didn't speak English? How are people not treated fairly in America? And we still see a lot of those issues today, okay? This picture here just shows the AIM picture, so the American Indian Movement. And it says, remember Wounded Knee. So Wounded Knee was a battle where a lot of people were killed. And here, this is a picture of Melvin Carter. He's the mayor of St. Paul, Minnesota. And it says, my hope is that this moment right now makes it clear that we are still choosing, that we still have to choose right. We have to choose inclusion. So inclusion means treating people fairly. And we still have to choose love as a country. Okay? Think about, what does that mean to you? What do you think that means in a term of civil rights? My hope is that this moment right now makes it clear that we still are choosing, that we are still have to choose right. We still have to choose inclusion, and we still have to choose love as a country. Okay? So your note sheet should be filled in. Make sure you have all the blanks filled in correctly, and you included pictures for our vocab words, and that needs to get uploaded to Schoology when you're done. So if you'd like to learn more about what we're talking about, you can always look at our textbook. We are on chapter 18, so you should have the Northern Lights app on your iPad already, but you can always re-download it from self-service. Our username is right here. You can always copy and paste it, and our password is here. Okay, if you have any questions on the assignment, please let us know. You can always email us or join our office hours. Have a good day.